Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is a lesson that's going to teach you everything that you need to know about time, timelines, and of course, different fields of social studies that exist in the field of academia. Let's go ahead and get started. Please remember to fill out your Google Doc guided notes as we progress and answer any key concept questions that might appear at the end. What exactly is history, and why is it such a big part about culture in world cultures? History is the study of the past. History is not just a simple list of facts, though, from the past. It is the way that people look at or interpret the meaning of those facts. Often, interpretation drives history, at least our analysis of it. Different people will look at the facts in different ways. For example, if you've ever experienced a moment in your life that sticks out to you, there's a good chance that you might vividly remember it because it affected you. However, ask yourself this question: were you the only one who actually witnessed that event? What did other people experience with you? Chances are, when asked about their recollection of this event, they might have a completely different interpretation of the event and the facts and that followed. So how do we know about history? History actually is written in a big way that helps us understand our world from a more objective standpoint. The period of prehistory refers to before writing existed, and the period of history, even still consisting of now, refers to a time when writing, on different forms, allowed us the chance to know what people were trying to say and communicate. Did you know that the earliest forms of history were written in caves found in Europe and Africa? But how do we know what really happened? That's a fair question. Many different types of ancient scholars, and of course people who looked at religion and theology objectively, often use history to guide them in their teachings and in their perceptions. Some use stories to make sense of different cultures and look at other cultures objectively. Some used a more scientific approach, attributing major events to human choice rather than divine or spiritual intervention. And they also might have relied on facts and observations, and astute observations led them to believe about certain events in history. When you look at the world today, there's different types of historians who look at history to try to make sense of the events that happened. World history in world cultures is broken down into four dynamic eras, brought to you by different events that forever changed the course of human and world history. Prehistory consists of the Big Bang and the formation of our universe as we know it, the emergence of humans, the development of tools, spoken language, and agriculture. Ancient times refers to the civilization arising in Mesopotamia, Egypt and the Age of Pharaohs, ancient India and China, the Southern Ocean trade, and classical Greece and Rome. The Middle Ages refers to Dark Ages in Europe, the rise of Islam, Maya civilization, Mongol conquests in Asia, and the Renaissance era in Europe. The modern era refers to moments that consist of conquest of the Americas, both North and South, liberal Enlightenment revolutions, industrialism and factories on the rise, world wars, and of course the space age with science and technology being a big part of that. As you can see, each era is divvied up by these unique events that have changed the course of human events forever. And that is one of the best ways that we can tell time. Speaking of time, we'll be using timelines a lot in world cultures this year. So let's go over some key terminology and lingo that you're going to have to know. What is BC? BC stands for before Christ. Often, BC is used in events that are just used to describe moments from long, long ago. For people, like historians or people who look at history objectively, who don't like to use religious terms, they might opt to use BCE, which stands for before the Common Era, instead. However, please keep in mind on the other side of a timeline you might hear words or years with the disclaimer of AD, which means after Christ, or Anno Domini in Latin. This is also called the Common Era, and it's used often by people, once again, who don't like to tell time in religious terms. Let's give you a visual representation of what I mean. Let's start off with the year 1 AD. Here's 500 BC. Here's the year 500 AD. Here's the year 100 AD. And here's the year 332 BC. As you can see, The longer ago an event is, that dictates whether or not BC or AD was used. 1 AD is a great disclaimer here that stands in the middle of our reference of time. But what about 0? There is no such thing as a year 0. It sounds awkward to say, and quite frankly, it just doesn't exist. The years, of course, you might be thinking of are the years 1 AD or 1 BC. So let's talk about timeline rules. How do you actually read a timeline? So dates are earlier from 1 AD, but dates are older from 1 AD to BC. It pretty much goes in that up and down fashion, which you might be more accustomed to thinking of visually if you have a timeline in front of you, which you will. There are some basic timeline rules that we must make heads and tails of right now. Let's go over the BC rule. The higher the date, the earlier in time it is. The AD rule refers to the higher the date, the later in time it is. When we say 2020, we don't mean 2020 BC, we mean 2020 AD. In today's times, we just never use the AD disclaimer. It's often just implied. Let's talk about how we can tell time in terms of passing of years. So, if it's in the same time period and we're asking you to understand how many years have passed, you subtract the dates. How many years are between 1000 AD and 500 AD? Well, they're on the same side of the timeline, so therefore the answer is 500 years. So, if in the same time period, once again, you subtract the dates to make sense of it even more. How many years are between 2000 BC and 1000 BC? We're talking about 1000 years. Even though it's on a different side of the timeline, the rule still holds the same. But what if the number of years are not in the same time period on a timeline? What about 2000 BC and 500 AD? We're talking about a grand total of 2,500 years between those two dates. You then add the dates if they're of a different time period disclaimer. Once again, if they're not in the same time period, you just add them. From the year 332 BC to 778 AD, we're talking about a grand total of 1,110 years in total. Some other terminology. What does circa mean? Circa just means around or about. You might hear something founded by or founded in or circa whatever, and that, of course, disclaimer tells us when that was around or about in terms of a foundation or beginning. Let's look at some other timeline examples as far as their proper labels that are used. 5000 BC, 20,000 BCE, 300 AD, or 800 CE. There's many different ways to tell time, but the universal rules and premises that we just talked about still hold true. You'll get more practice with timelines throughout this lesson, and also creating your own and also time capsule. Let's move on to the social sciences. When we talk about social sciences, we're talking about different fields of academic study that comprise to form social studies. The reason why we call it social studies is because that there are many disciplines within the fields of social sciences. Often for high school students, when they think of social studies, they think of history classes. But that's only scratching the surface. Social studies is so much more. There's anthropology, which is the study of humankind. Anthropologists might look at different cultural attributes of people from around the world and look at their development objectively. There's archaeology, which is the physical study of human societies, usually from artifacts or primary sources that give us an in-depth look about how people might have lived from years long, long ago. There's economics, which is the study of the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. For example, economists might look at the way that markets fluctuate and go up and down, and they might try to find things like what causes financial crashes and depressions, and what causes good tax policy and good revenue in certain eras of history. There's sociology, which looks at the study of human behavior in groups and the study of societies and how they function. Sociologists might look at issues of today, for example, issues pertaining to political differences between Democrats and Republicans, or thoughts and opinions and justifications on problems pertaining to police brutality and the divide in our country around law enforcement. There's also philosophy, which is the study of social thoughts and thought processes that have taken place over time. Looking at philosophy gives us an in-depth view of how people thought about the world around them and how those thoughts have developed over time to define the world we know. As you can see, there's different types of fields of social studies. But in world cultures, we're going to be using all these fields. The best way to make sense of the world around us is to use all these fields together that appear here in this word web to make more sense of the world around us in a way that's objective, fair, balanced, and all-inclusive. Thank you for watching this presentation, and please remember to complete the rest of your lesson accordingly.